Well, then welcome everybody. I'm pretty sure there will be more people join us tonight. Welcome to GEO-Talk and welcome Nikki Florio. It's been a while, but I'm always so grateful to see you. And as I announced that your presentations are really, really top of the line, and I'm so grateful that you joined us tonight. And you're going to present about geoengineering and how geoengineering influences the wildfires. Nikki, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself. And here we go. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So my name's Nikki. For those of you that don't know, I'm the founder and director of Be Heroic, and Be Heroic is an adult-focused pollinator and climate project. Years ago, I wanted to find a way to share information on geoengineering without having it sound like what people today consider a conspiracy theory. So that's why I started Be Heroic. And Bettina and I spoke a short while ago and discussed that we were going to kind of add a few things. I'm trying not to overlap what Jeff has already shared and what Jim has already shared, but we're going to be doing a presentation, should be about an hour, and then we'll have a Q&A. Is that right? Afterwards,
yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start the little talk here. So this is called Earth, Wind, and Fire Geoengineered Influence. And what we're going to cover first are just some things that are happening on the planet right now and what gives them value and how they are being impacted by wildfires. And then we're going to cover a little bit of weather and the impacts that we're seeing that can't possibly be from carbon dioxide. And y'all are familiar with geoengineering, but for those who aren't, we're going to do a short overview of the objectives and some of the technologies, not all of them. And then the ones specifically that have big influences on wildfires and how wildfires are being engineered. And then we're going to cover some of the IoT, or the Internet of Things, the fourth industrial revolution technologies and how they impact the environment and wildfires. And then we'll have a quick Q&A. So we'll be going from this presentation and a little ways through. We're going to be going to a worldview map so you can see what's happening over this past month over Canada. So we have several different wildfires from different areas in North America, and then we'll go to that. So everybody right now is focused on the political circus and the new viruses and vaccines and everything that are coming out with the pandemic, and all of that is it's important, but it's a big distraction from what we actually need to live. Now, we hear a lot about climate and climate technologies and carbon dioxide, but what we should be discussing is weather, because weather is what we are experiencing now on a daily and monthly basis. So weather impacts the environment, but the environment can also have influence over weather. And the economy is wholly dependent on the environment. The environment supplies us with what's called natural capital. Every single thing that we use and every single thing that we eat comes from nature. So right now we have failing communities, regional communities, national and international communities, and then global communities. And our health is failing as well. A lot of that is from environmental impacts. Some of it is from our food, some of it is from vaccines and things like that. But the environment itself is being so poisoned and so manipulated that it's having huge impacts on all of us. So when we think of life on Earth, when someone says, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? We generally are thinking of ourselves. We're thinking about work, or we're thinking about our next vacation, or our kids' lunch, or walking the dogs. But even when we're living our life today, the majority of people on the planet are completely distracted. Outside of what they're doing, They can't go anywhere without their technologies. And when you live your life through this one-dimensional, or maybe two-dimensional, you can hear it as well as see it. When you live your life through a device, you're not experiencing nature. There's a disconnect. So you're not consuming nature. You're not smelling it and feeling the air, and even sometimes tasting things like the salty air if you go onto a coastline. So we're often very distracted today. And even when we think of nature, some people don't travel much further than their own homes when they think about being in nature. And not even everybody has an actual yard. But when we think of the biome, what Earth is made up of, we have been here like the blink of an eye in geologic time. But the trillions and trillions of microorganisms, viruses and bacteria and other things, and then the lichen that came after that, and then the fungi, the plant-animal life combinations, and then insects. Insect life makes up the bulk of animals on the entire planet. There's around 1 million known species of the more than 20 million or so species of insects. And so all of those elements are the first elements on Earth. And then from there came the animal kingdom. So we have mammals and fish and reptiles and amphibians and such, and birds, of course. So we all have come after the foundations of life brought us here. When we think of Earth too, unless you live on a coastline, you generally aren't thinking about the ocean. But the ocean is where all plant life began. That's where the first oxygen was produced out of the ocean, or the bulk of the oxygen was produced out of the ocean from those plants. And those plants travel through currents. And then on land, as trees developed and grasses developed, they were pollinated by the wind. So water and wind pollination is the oldest form of pollination. And when trees started to grow flowers for pollination, that's when the scope of winged and terrestrial insects and birds and bats and small mammals and all the other animals that accidentally or intentionally pollinate brought us these beautiful, fragrant, very emotionally and intellectually inspiring plants came from. But they also produce food for us, foods and medicines. So we really need to keep everything, all of these amazing life forms alive if we want to live, because they have built up and they are preserving our ecosystems. So without these systems, we don't exist. And today we control every element that allows these systems to exist. And the control is done through a bunch of different technologies, from agrochemical to radiation technologies, to aerosol technologies, and more. So what we're seeing more and more of today is a highly manipulated environment. When it comes to climate change, that term itself has changed repeatedly over the past several decades. In the late 60s and early 70s, we called the changes, or the coming changes, the greenhouse effect. And when you walk into a greenhouse, what you're walking into is an area that's where they're trapping gases, and plants grow within a greenhouse, as y'all probably know. And in that greenhouse, the temperatures increase from the outside air. It's also very humid because you have a lot of transpiration from the soil and transpiration from the plants. And it has very healthy oxygen levels. People feel really good when they go into greenhouses because the plants are releasing oxygen and absorbing carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is so important, especially in commercial greenhouses, that massive CO2 emitters are installed in these big greenhouses so that the plants can grow healthy year round. And yet on Earth today, we're seeing the exact opposite of that. We're seeing much lower humidity levels, massive drops in oxygen, and very dry environments. So by the 90s and early 2000s, they were calling it global warming. And then more recently, they're calling it climate change because we're having these odd freezing events. Now, when you think of who is in the forefront of all this, we don't see a bunch of different scientists. It's kind of like with the pandemic. We didn't see a bunch of physicians and scientists telling us what was going on with the pandemic. We saw Bill Gates or Fauci or some other talking head that didn't really know about the technologies used in vaccines that weren't used for war or being manipulated through pharmaceutical initiation, where climate engineering, climate intervention, and larger scale weather modification is being done by different organizations and individuals. So we never hear about them, good or bad, whether they're a whistleblower or not. So with weather, the very first variable in weather, and these are things that can happen over several weeks or several months or even during the year. The first variable is your proximity to the sun, because that's gonna rule the general warmth or cold of the region. The second variable is wind. How often are you going to have wind? What's causing the wind? Because heat causes convection and convective currents, which can influence everything from oceans to the atmospheric rivers that are going around the northern and southern hemispheres. And landforms also influence weather. For example, if you're coming from a coastline, from the ocean to a coastline, and the coastline is flat, you're going to have a different inland weather system than you would if you had a mountain range. And you can also have, if you have a high mountain range, you can also have what's called a rain shadow effect, where the system builds up against the side of the mountain and releases the moisture, and then on the backside you have a desert. But proximity to water, rivers, huge lakes or oceans, the temperature is going to cause different rates of evaporation and things like that. And then we also have volcanic and solar events and space events, and these things have been cyclical and generally the same for thousands to millions of years. So we know that climate change from carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide equivalents like methane and other gases, they aren't and cannot possibly cause a lot of what we're seeing today. And the number one thing that carbon dioxide is not going to cause is drought. You can't have drought on a warming planet. And for those of you that know people like Dane Wigington, he says this all the time. And the reason you can't have drought on a drying planet is because when it's hot, you're going to have constant perpetual evaporation from soils and plants and water. It's constantly going up in the sky. So we should have more of a tropical expansion from the mid latitudes. That would be more conducive to a greenhouse type of event. Now we have drought, and then we also are having wildfires because everything is dried out. We have areas throughout the world that are completely void of dew, DEW, of dew, that moisture on the ground that we used to have for thousands to millions of years. When in the evening, when the winds stop and the air cools and the air sinks and moisture forms on grasses or prairies or leaves, it feeds the structure of the soil and the microbiome on plants and everything. And small animals and insects sometimes use that water as their only water source. So this is also driving an extinction event at the very foundation of life on Earth. But we're seeing a lot more tornadic events. Now, tornadic events, these are heavy wind events. And we're seeing them very anomalously, which is another thing that would not happen from carbon dioxide. We're also seeing extreme weather whiplash, hot, cold, and then we're also seeing zero wind events on very hot days. The sun is just searing and there's no wind, and you can't not have wind with the amount of heat in a lot of the areas where we're seeing this wind stilling, and that's occurring because of geoengineering as well. So I'm going to have to go out of this for just 1 minute. I'm going to step out of this so I can make this smaller. Okay. So sorry about that. So we're going to cover mostly geoengineering, and then we're going to cover a little bit of 5G and the Internet of Things, and how the fourth industrial revolution is kind of pushing all of this, and what the wildfires have to do with 5G. So geoengineering is defined, and this is the scientific term, just through scientific foundations: deliberate large-scale intervention in Earth's natural systems to counteract climate change. Now, we know that this is not the only definition. This is the definition that is fed to the general public, so that they try to see it as something that's beneficial, kind of like the vaccines. So all of the objectives in geoengineering, sometimes they're singular and sometimes they cross over. So for science foundations, they're studying two major areas: solar radiation management, which is the blocking of sunlight, and carbon dioxide removal, which is the removal of carbon from the atmosphere, either at the source or from the general environment itself. Now, we already have plants that do that for us for free. So we really shouldn't need to work on any of that. But for commercial geoengineering is a massive moneymaker because of the industries that are dependent on weather. So controlling the weather around those industries is very important in making money. And for the military, controlling the weather so you can control societies or the enemy, both foreign and domestic, is a big deal. And you'll see organizations and individuals that cross over all three of these together all the time, whether it's a small organization or an entire country or partnerships between countries. So these are two little examples from Stanford and Oxford University. They're two of dozens and dozens of major universities, and hundreds now that are just starting, but the major leaders in geoengineering studies. So on the left-hand side, you have a graph that shows the effectiveness versus the affordability of the technology, and then you have red and orange denotes that they're not very safe technologies, versus the green, which are safer technologies. So for example, CCS, so the carbon sequestration at the source, is pretty effective and it's pretty affordable because you're grabbing that carbon dioxide right where it's being emitted. Ocean fertilization is pretty affordable as well, slightly effective, but it's a dangerous thing because it's impacting oceans in a bunch of different ways. This is kind of misleading here. This is afforestation, or the planting of forests, but in geoengineering, they also plant crops. Now, it's very affordable to put seeds in the ground or to plant saplings. But it's not very effective, especially with the forest, because it takes 30 plus years to grow a forest. When universities like Oxford and Stanford and Penn State and these other universities talk about planting forests, they don't mean planting a wonderful, beautiful mixed conifer forest, or if you're in South America, a beautiful rainforest with a bunch of different diverse plants. They're talking about genetically engineered forests and genetically engineered crops. With stratospheric aerosols, this is the effectiveness, very effective. We already know that. You can block sunlight with these aerosols. They've been doing it for decades now. And it is very affordable, but it's not very safe because that nanomaterial, whatever it is that they're putting in the sky, eventually falls to Earth. Plus, it is blocking out sunlight, life-giving sunlight that allows plants to photosynthesize, allows our bodies to produce vitamin D. It also helps with happiness. The sunlight also pushes weather and creates winds and helps with the seasons and helps clean the air. And this is disrupting all of that. Now for Oxford University, they work on the cooling, how cool can these technologies make the planet versus the readiness of the technology and the cost. So biochar is very ready. You can collect that at the source. Doing cloud seeding with transoceanic liners or any engineered ships is very ready and very affordable. And then of course, aerosols are very cheap to deliver. Space mirrors, this is an older graphic. It says that it's not going to be ready for a while, but we've already been using these. We've been using space mirrors and space reflectors for decades now. So for the past 20 years, especially, the number of different conferences and workshops on geoengineering are moving forward at a greater and greater pace. And you have a lot more people investing in geoengineering without actually stopping to think about how to make the earth better without blocking sunlight and sequestering carbon, using nature to heal itself. So for 50 or 60 years, we've had different types of agreements. We've been writing regulations. We have peace accords and governance and government regulations on different types of things that go on. And this happens in different countries, and it happens nationally and internationally. And you've probably already familiar with Jim Lee's got a wonderful website, Weather Modification History, that has just a fantastic outline and overview of these, the history of all of those different meetings, and also the actual history on documents for weather modification. So the World Meteorological Organization, this is just an example of one of the documents for an operational plan. So in this plan, 13 plus $billion is allocated through a trust fund. So within this trust, there's a polar protection trust fund, a Swiss trust fund, Global Greenhouse Gas Information Systems Trust Fund. So all these trust funds are designed to help fund further geoengineering research and development and execution. So this isn't just for the science foundations. This is for commercial operations and military as well. So we're less than 3 months out from 2025. And in 1996, when they wrote Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, they had to get permission from Microsoft, Bill Gates, to use the clip art from Microsoft. So this may have been when he learned about geoengineering. But this is one of the most well-known of all of the documents for geoengineering. It lays out the basic technologies and how they can be used to support our troops and the US's troops, the US's friends, and how we can impact our enemies. And way back then, we were already using different types of weather modification technologies. This is still part of the weather modification, not so much the geoengineering technology. But when you watch television, the History Channel had a TV show on a cloud maker. And this is a massive project from NASA. This thing's a couple 100 feet high. And this speaker was discussing how, one day we'll be able to make clouds and make these big, huge clouds, but you don't need this massive freaking machine that is stationary, because we already have the Torus Molecular Cloud Maker, the TMC-65. And these things are pretty small. They're about the size of a minivan. And you can use a single one, or you can use a fleet of these little TMC 135s, and you can line them up along a desert. You can line them up along a mountain range. And within a few minutes, you have, for a single machine, you've got, 100 square miles or so covered. Now, these don't look like natural clouds. You can see they're kind of beige-ish. But this can be used as a base for seeding systems, or it can be used to block, like the World War II cloud curtains that you see in different presenters' videos. We've used them. Jim Lee has used them. I've seen other presenters use them as well. So, you know, when you're kind of backing away from this, if you look at it from an aerial view, you can see just how massive this is. And this is only about 4 minutes into them turning this on. So it's a tiny machine with a lot of output because of the size of the material and particulates within that. So a third of all industry on Earth is really directly connected to the weather. Military is a huge part of that, but communications and ground and space technology providers, and then both conventional and sustainable, what they call sustainable energy, is also highly dependent on the weather. So whether you're an oil rig out in the middle of the ocean, you don't want those massive waves. If you can control the weather around a region that has a bunch of oil drilling rigs, you know, you're going to be able to make a lot more money a lot more quickly. But if you go into an area and it's an active war, you can also use weather to destroy that, and you don't have to drop a single bomb or anything. So for mining as well, it's very important. Oh, and when it comes to green or sustainable energy, things like solar, you can really greatly support solar by keeping clouds from forming over the PV systems, over the photovoltaic systems. Or if you want to ruin a country's solar systems, you can create perpetual clouds so that the energy draw goes down. And with things like wind turbines, you can freeze the wind turbines in the winter, or you can stop the wind in the summer so that they can't produce energy if they're using alternative energy. And one of the reasons that Bill Gates is investing in nuclear energy is he knows this. So with geoengineering, he's not putting all of his money into solar and wind. He's putting his money into what he calls advanced nuclear, which is just as dangerous as conventional nuclear because it produces the same type of waste. But with agrochemical companies, agriculture is hugely dependent, whether it's farming or ranching, on the weather. So controlling the weather around that and being able to destroy people's crops and livestock while simultaneously continuing to produce your own is a technological feat. And that's what they are working on right now. And the nano and biotech industry is a huge part of this because the aerosol technologies, transporting goods and using transportation as services is also very influenced by the weather, whether you're going across an ocean or across a continent, trains and planes and automobiles and things like that. And then there's also some private investors and beneficiaries. China and Russia and other countries, even the countries in the Middle East, they're very open about large-scale weather modification. In the United States, we were very open about weather modification until the late 90s. I remember even as a kid in the 70s learning about rainmaking, and then I grew up in Lake Tahoe, the Lake Tahoe Basin in California and Nevada, and they cloud seed, and they also do snowmaking every single year. And it used to be in the local news all the time. And now, over the past 10 years, they haven't even whispered a bit of it, unless you work directly for the resorts or the government and you're working on those systems alone. Anyway, China in 2018 built a massive rainmaking network, and this was designed to benefit agriculture. So it fed a handful of major rivers, and on those rivers as well, there are hydroelectric dams. So they're using the rain for both agriculture and energy. And then by 2020, they expanded it by several million square miles. So these are massive projects that have huge downstream impacts. They also use it for other investments and entertainment, like the Olympics. In 2008, they rained out the system they seeded the systems that were coming in so that they could have sunshine. And by 2022, 2022 was the first engineered Winter Olympics, so using ice nucleation chemicals. So if you're watching some of the events, you go back and watch some of the events, you'll see the slopes, and then in the back, it's completely dry. Canada is like the U.S. and the rest of the world, heavily vested and invested in geoengineering. This is from the Canadian-Indian Partnership, the Center for International Governance Innovation. So this is a partnership between India and China. So they discuss the projects and the agencies involved, or whoever the firms are, the types of projects, whether they're carbon dioxide removal or CDR, or whether they're solar radiation management, or if it's a rainmaking program. So, and then they have the status, whether it's an ongoing or completed status. So if it's a rainfall enhancement project, it discusses who's doing it, the government of Gujarat. And then, so it's weather modification to increase precipitation, and that's completed. But if you scroll down a little bit and you're looking at, for example, cloud aerosol interaction and precipitation enhancement experiments. This is an experiment, not a project. You guys are working with the government of India on weather modification, and this is an ongoing thing. So if they're working on this weather modification and increased precipitation, why aren't they doing some of those projects over your wildfires to help put the fucking wildfires out? You know, those are things that people should be asking their governments. So they also do oil refinery, protecting weather around that, but also for carbon capture and utilizing that carbon. That's another ongoing project. So those are just some of the examples. Whoops. And I forgot to mention these slides in the lower left-hand side. If you snapshot these slides, they always have the link, so you guys can check those out as well. So this wonderful graphic, I really, really appreciate this graphic. This is from Climate Viewer. Jim Lee's brilliant at creating these very simple to read types of graphics. Sorry, there's a little tiny gnat in here. So this covers most of the technologies: ionospheric heaters and satellites and lasers and sounding rockets. And then for aerosols, he's got contrail-induced cirrus, and you also see some ship tracks down here, and then water vapor pollution. So, you know, these are the bulk of the technologies that are used. Now, these technologies are sometimes used independently, and sometimes they're used collectively. You'll have several of these technologies being used in the same projects. These are images of what natural weather is. You know, we have clear skies above cumulus clouds, and on a warm day, you'd have a lot of evaporation from agriculture and crops in a big open area. And those cumulus clouds would build into cumulonimbus clouds, and they'd rain out. Or if it's a windy day, you'd have lenticulars. And then after it rains, when the sunlight hits the water droplets, you'd have a nice low arcing, I think it's 14-degree arch. So this is pretty much what natural weather is or was. Today, what we're seeing is much different. They've engineered the weather so much that we no longer have our natural clouds. So what we see today when we look at these collective satellite images that map out what we're seeing as Earth, what we're seeing is a lot more haze in the atmosphere, but it's not haze from moisture. It's not tropical haze. It's a very dry haze. It's becoming very super saturated. So by 2017, we had so manipulated the environment that they listed new cloud types, and it was the first time they'd listed clouds in several decades. Now you don't just magically have new clouds. You don't just magically have another limb coming off of your body after your body's been the same. You can't possibly have magically a new cloud from nature. So the very first cloud listed on that is homogenitus, which actually means man-made. So you have these homogenitus clouds. Now I have these three images on here because when you have these metallicized clouds and frequencies are applied, you end up with these other cloud types, and you can actually see it with your eyes. So when they build this first cloud layer, you can also get what's called the new alto cirrus, and this is kind of a scalar version. So these two clouds are both produced from that, and to go from alto cirrus to scalar or scalar to alto cirrus, you can sometimes see, if you're just hanging out, you can see it going across the sky like someone was wiping it in just a few minutes sometimes, or even a few seconds as it comes out the back of the airplane. So in a contrail to cirrus system, sometimes these are randomly happening, and other times you'll see markers in the sky that are like a T or an X, or you'll see where they're setting or reading systems like these dashes. Years ago, one of the best documentaries to introduce people to geoengineering is called Why in the World Are They Spraying? Why in the World Are They Spraying? And Scott Stevens, who was an award-winning meteorologist, explained how they would do these dashes to set the systems up and how you can read the systems from those dashes. So if you want to set up a system quickly, you can make parallel lines or a grid, or you can have pilots go and goof off, or you can just use existing aircraft that will release from a remote controlled area. This is one of thousands of patents on weather modification. These patents can be found on all sorts of different websites, on geoengineeringwatch.org, Agricultural Defense Coalition, weather modification history, all kinds of stuff. We have links to these on our website as well. But this is a specific one: combustible compositions for generating aerosols, particularly suitable for cloud modification, weather control, and the aerosolization process. So you can use sulfur and sulfur yielding compounds, or different types of metals or chemicals. These are aftermarket nozzles on these planes, and they will set these nozzles up over the engines, or on the fuselage, or on the tail, or across the wingspan. So what you end up doing is you end up seeing a lot of different kinds of patterns that aren't necessarily coming out of the engines themselves. Sometimes you'll see stuff in the sky and it'll look like an aerosol, but it's a fuel dump. But other than that, what we're generally seeing are aerosols being intentionally dumped by the planes. Now, the fuels themselves contain a lot of these aerosols. So the fuels as well are releasing these aerosols into the atmosphere. So the JP8 jet fuels, and Jim Lee has a fantastic presentation on that. The only thing, I mean, I love Jim's work. I think it is fantastic. The only area I both agree and disagree with him on is that I think that the fuels are causing these aerosols, as well as compartments where they're being funneled through nozzles to be emitted into. I think both of those are correct. So because a lot of the same chemical and metallic agents are in the same thing. And now aerosols are also emitted through balloons. So in stratospheric aerosol injection, when you get to the upper stratosphere, you're going to see more and more, as we're moving along, less of the airplanes spraying. And sometimes you'll see clouds forming without any airplanes at all, but they're not natural clouds. They're still way up in the sky. Now, in order to have a condensation trail, a natural condensation trail, the first thing you need is an engine that makes a condensation trail. And high bypass turbofan engines are designed to not make a condensation trail. So you also has to be, minus 40 degrees and at least 70% humidity. So these clouds should never form over desert areas. They shouldn't be forming in the summertime over the tropics. But we see a lot more and more often these odd wispy clouds. Now, the day before this happened, or shortly before this happened in the sky, this is in Nevada. This is over a valley called the Carson Valley. I saw teeny tiny, you can barely see them. They're very, very high out there, teeny tiny balloons. Now, we didn't have any planes on this particular day, but we saw these things forming kind of out of nowhere. And these are engineered clouds. They're actually a bright blue color. This is kind of an odd way that my camera picked this up. But in the 35 years that I lived in Tahoe, I never saw these clouds before, ever. And on this particular day, I happened to see them after I saw those little stratospheric aerosol, what I think were a stratospheric aerosol balloon. So this is an airplane that has got a wingtip to wingtip sprayer, and then I believe three of the nozzles are on over the four engines. So you can see that the two on the left are on, and the one on the right is on the far right. But in the center, it's also releasing these plumes. So that's just one of the ways. Now, when you have a cloud layer that's already built, you can spray above that cloud layer as well. This video is from Geoengineering Watch. Or this spray video is from Geoengineering Watch. And I'm just gonna kind of fast forward to where you can see the close-up. So you can kind of see these little nozzles along the span of the wing. So this is like a wingtip to wingtip sprayer. And you'll see that it's clearly not coming from those two engines, but they are spraying, not just this plane, but other planes in the background. You can see that they're spraying above an existing cloud layer. When I was young, I was very lucky. We got to fly to the Midwest to visit family, and we got to fly to Hawaii. And if it was the winter time, we would get above this beautiful, billowy, natural white cloud layer and see a brilliant blue sky. But today, when you fly, no matter how high you get, there is a perpetual haze, and that's because they are just spraying the heck out of the environment above these systems. There's kind of a chemical coloring, chemical footprint left with this plane as well.
Nikki, can I just quickly ask you a question? Do you happen to know what altitude this plane is flying?
That one right there? That last plane? No.
Yeah.
No, but it was above the cloud layer, so it was above 25,000 feet. It's probably up it looked like it was about 1,000 feet higher at the very least. So, this is Jasper Kirby, and he's one of the top particle physicists for CERN. So CERN is a nuclear project that's looking for the God particle. But in 2019, Jasper won the Benjamin Y.H. Liu Award of the American Association for Aerosol Research, and that prize recognizes contributions to aerosol instrumentation and experimental techniques. And his project was called CLOUD, and the committee that awarded the Liu Award stated that the CLOUD project was arguably the most effective experiment to study atmospheric nucleation and growth ever designed and constructed. And so he is a world-class aerosol scientist. Now, way back in 2009, during one of his talks, he was discussing particle physics, of course, and he was explaining how all this nanomaterial being emitted by planes is breaking up the moisture in the atmosphere, and it's keeping that moisture suspended, and it's super saturating that. Now, water itself is also considered a greenhouse gas, but when you super load the atmosphere, the upper atmosphere with this moisture, and you move it, and then you stimulate it, you can cause massive flooding. But you can also induce drought because you just keep that moisture broken up with these tiny particulates, because those smaller particulates in the upper atmosphere keep the clouds as they rain down through the atmosphere. They break up the moisture in the lower atmosphere. So this is him during the talk discussing this.
There is no sound coming through.
Oh, you're not hearing anything? Hello? Are you not hearing anything?
No, we don't.
Oh,
No.
sorry. Let me go back and reshare. So, share sound. Sorry about that. Okay, let me know if you can hear
by
that.
gravitation, and then they drop out. If you spread that out,
Can you hear that? Did you guys hear that?
Yes, I hear that.
Oh, okay, thanks.
more droplets, the cloud will stay longer. Now, there's plenty of evidence that large regions of the climate are lacking sufficient aerosol to form clouds. Contrails are a well-known example of that. These are not smoke trails. These are clouds which are seeded by jets dumping aerosols into the upper atmosphere. Also less familiar, but also very important, these are ship tracks. And this is a huge area. This is the north coast of America. There's Alaska. These are ship tracks over Alaska, and they're clouds being seeded by extra aerosol. Now, in particle physics, we do know that charged particles can form condensation seeds, but we have to say instantly that this is a non-natural condition. This is where we generate several 100% supersaturation.
So you got several 100% supersaturation in these clouds. Now this is from August 19th of this year. NASA Worldview on the left-hand side. And you can see the fresh aerosols, the fresh ship tracks, but that entire mass off the coast of Alaska all the way down to Baja, it's off over the Pacific, that's constantly being built. Our oceans for 20 years have been constantly layered and relayered with these clouds, these artificial clouds, these homogeneous clouds. So those aerosols have already turned into an altocirrus or an altostratus, that engineered altocirrus and altostratus. Now, in nature, when you have natural clouds form, they swirl and move around the planet in northern and southern hemisphere, and they're swirling around and they're waxing and waning. But what we're seeing are these big masses of clouds that they're just constantly building up. So in the evening, you still have that huge cloud layer over not just the Pacific, but all of global oceans. And what happens when those cloud layers don't break up at night, like they would naturally in nature, is that locks the heat in. The ocean is constantly trying to release heat back into the atmosphere to let itself cool. So this, our oceanic geoengineering, as well as exacerbating the warming of the planet. So this area that I just showed you, it's almost 4 million square kilometers. And that's just that one section going up to you over that single day period. So nanomaterials, they're very tiny. But what we're finding in rainwater is a lot of the same material. Now, this rainwater is coming down and it's getting into our soils, and the plants are picking it up, and it's going into our food, and it's going into the food of wildlife. And the aluminum and barium, strontium, and then the different mycotoxins, and the U.S. military uses chaff and a bunch of other things. There's also carbon black and different coal fly ash materials, and a bunch of other things that we're finding constantly coming down. The carbon nanotubes were found very recently, again in rainwater, out of western or north-southeastern Canada, in rainwater, but they were found earlier, just right after the pandemic, and it could have been because we weren't looking at it that we didn't see it, but that was when the first kind of whistleblowers were finding it. And because we have all of these different materials in different planes, and probably even over the oceans and with balloons, they leave different types of footprints. So what you're seeing here, this is not condensation from an airplane, not simple condensation. This is a combination of materials. And you'll notice after different types of weather events, different rain events or snow events, sometimes you'll find a lot more filaments, or you'll find tiny insects, like little teeny tiny insects. Or they'll simply just do releases like Oxytex mosquito releases during some of the aerosol or different wind events. In 2011, in the United States, the Department of the Interior stated that contrails formed by aircraft can evolve into cirrus clouds that are indistinguishable from those formed naturally. Now, in the entirety of my life, growing up until I was around 40, we were in kind of a protected area, even from geoengineering. But as a kid, I grew up in a central farmland area on the west coast of the United States, and I never saw cirrus clouds. I would see cumulus clouds, but we had generally fog or high clouds. So it was just a mat of clouds, but they were very whitish blue. They weren't this filthy, funky color that we have today because of all of the materials in them. But they further state that these unnatural clouds might be causing more climate warming than all the carbon dioxide emitted by aircraft since the start of aviation. And then by 2016, the Environmental Protection Agency stated that greenhouse gas emissions from certain types of jet aircraft engines contribute to the pollution that causes climate change and endangers the health of Americans and the environment. And it is the largest driver of human-caused climate change. So if these planes are the largest cause of human-caused climate change, or largest driver, why haven't we grounded all of the aircraft instead of letting them continue and pretending like carbon dioxide is the problem? In 2015, this is just an abstract of what coal fly ash is and what the U.S. Department of the Interior stated that it was. So they state it's an industrial byproduct, and it's derived from coal combustion in thermal power plants, and its improper disposal has become an environmental concern and resulted in a waste of recoverable resources. So it was considered hazardous waste. Coal fly ash was considered hazardous waste, but by 2014, it was delisted from the Toxic Substances Control Act and is now considered solid, not toxic waste, and it can be dumped into landfills, rivers, and aerosolized. And in around 2014, we still had good environmental organizations, a few left in the United States, and they were wondering why we were importing coal fly ash from China and India. So it's one of the elements in aerosolized geoengineering. So carbon black as well is one of the main types of particulate in both anthropogenic and naturally occurring soot, and it is a climate forcing agent that contributes to global warming. It is also listed in weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025, it's listed down here, carbon black dust. The use in weather modification starting in 2005. But we've been able to use it, and we know what it does, going way back to before 1960. When we look up in the sky, we generally are seeing during the day a lot of lighter colored aerosols being emitted from planes all over the world. But if you fly on an airline, if you're still flying on airlines and you happen to go over a cloud cover area, when you're in an airplane, most people are looking at their devices. They're either on a phone or they're looking at a screen in front of them. And a lot of people just nobody looks out the window anymore when they fly, which blows me away. But they'll shut their screen, so they're not looking out. But you see a lot more of these over existing cloud layers than you do just flying around during the day. But you'll still see them early at dawn, along with the white trails. You'll see these darker trails, and also at dusk. So when it's done raining, whether it's an artificial system or not, when they spray, you always see this really funky haze. You should have bright, clear skies after a rainfall. This is Doctors J. Marvin Herndon and Dr. Mark Whiteside, both brilliant researchers. Dr. Whiteside is also a physician. They've written several dozen peer-reviewed published papers on the human health and environmental impacts of geoengineering. And they cover everything from the human health diseases to the global changes in weather to how these impact wildfires. And we might have Dr. Herndon on later if you want to talk to him or ask him any questions. But they do a lot of information on how carbon black is impacting the environment and where it comes from and everything. So when it comes to fires, this is our fire section. When fires occur, they usually occur because it's extremely dry, the land, especially forest fires, because the area is very dry, there's not a lot of humidity, and the plants are already impacted. So when planes are flying over, especially during the summer and the fall, over forests, forests are notoriously dry. I'm not talking about rainforests. I'm talking about mixed conifer forests like Canada and US, northern US have. You should never see condensation trails because, again, condensation trails are emitted by planes under extreme conditions that are very cold and very humid. And if it's that cold and that humid, we would have natural clouds forming underneath them as well. So nanomaterials exhibit an explosion severity that's not disproportionate to micrometer sized materials, but the likelihood of explosion is higher because they have lower ignition energies and temperatures. This is an article from the Air Force Office of Scientific Research from the Air Force Research Laboratory talking about nano-aluminum powder. So munitions enhanced with nano-aluminum powder give performance and lethality enhancements in miniaturized munitions for weaponization of unmanned air vehicles, but also munitions using nano-aluminum powder give improved lethality because they improve the air blast and shrapnel accelerating capability. So when fire agencies and fire chiefs and firefighters, especially the older ones in the US and Canada and even down in Mexico, started noticing around 2010 that we were having these odd anomalies in our wildfires, and we were having a lot more fire nados, these fire tornadoes. A lot of that is because we had already been dumping these aluminum-based nanomaterials over these forests for a long time. This happens to be from 2013. It's taken directly from tree bark. the best way to take a sample for geoengineering material, especially if it relates to Welsbach patent, aluminum, barium, strontium, is directly from the rainwater. But we had a wildfire in 2007 over Tahoe, so someone took this from the bark, and we had 1,800 micrograms per liter of aluminum, 140 of barium, and 80 of strontium. So, you know, we're in a pretty heavy duty area like you guys are up north. So kind of going back to how natural clouds are, how they're formed and how they behave. If you're older, you remember we used to have beautiful, bright, clear skies. And when cumulus clouds formed, they had a flat base and they were billowy on top, and they kind of rolled across the sky on this block of air. So these on the bottom, these are natural clouds. They're cumulus clouds, and it's probably a warm day. They want to build up. But if you look above them, you can see all of these aerosol clouds. Now, what's happening right there, I'm going to show you in this time-lapse photo graph on the right-hand side. So an airplane has made an aerosol loop, and in the very far distance, you can see that there's some cumulus clouds. Now, this weather system happens to be coming towards this photographer. So as the time goes on, this aerosol ring is growing broader and broader as these clouds are going from being cumulus clouds, these smaller flat base clouds, to becoming a big collective pyrocumulus cloud, or a thunderhead. So as the clouds below start to build, because it's getting hotter during the day, this upper engineered homogeneous cloud is spreading. And then by the bottom, you can see that this cloud wants to become a thundercloud. It wants to rain out moisture because it's a hot day there. But as it reaches this top layer of cloud, it starts to break apart. And that's because these engineered clouds cap the convective system. You have to have convection, the circular upwelling. And so these engineered clouds stop those from occurring. Now, cumulus clouds happen from moisture, and pyrocumulus clouds happen from fire. So you have fire and ash that's becoming a cloud right here. And it gets high up in the atmosphere. And if it gets high enough and it's not capped, it gathers moisture from the upper atmosphere and it folds over on itself and it creates rain. This is how massive wildfires throughout history have put themselves out. So this is an example of a pyrocumulus cloud becoming one of those big rain showers. Now, this was an experiment that was done, a video that was being done because there was a ground fire in Queensland. So you can see the fire over here on the ground. There's no sound to this, so you're not missing any sound. So the day's going on, and all this ash is getting mixed in with the natural cloud that's building up. And you can see that it builds into a pyrocumulus, and then it becomes a pyrocumulonimbus right here. And it's starting to saturate because it's pulling that moisture down, and then you have all this rain. So throughout the evening, this is going to be raining. So by the time the fire gets here, you're going to have a nice cooled down, very moist area, and it will put the fire out, the fire itself out. Now it's really heavy rain right there. So that's what nature does. It heals itself. But what we see today is constantly, every time there's a fire, they'll start to spray and cap the system if it wants to become a pyrocumulus. Additionally, if the fires start to go out and the engineers don't want the fires out, they can just spray more aluminum and keep that fire, or more aerosol and keep that fire going. So I apologize, these are both in the United States, but we will be going over to Canada in just a couple minutes. So you notice the difference in these fires. There are natural cumulus clouds on the left-hand side where the Yellowstone fire is above that smoke cloud. On the right-hand side, the lower right-hand side, you see that full engineered layer capping that smoke right away. So these are just some images from further back from those fires. in between when I last met with Bettina and doing this today, we had a fire just outside of Lake Tahoe. And we weren't supposed to have clouds on this particular day. Last week, it was just sunny straight across the board. Of course, we know that when they do these engineered systems, that's not how it works. So the day before the fire, they did a lot of spraying. And in the upper right-hand side, this is just south of the fire. On the upper right-hand side, you could see those little marker aerosols. So those aren't aerosols that go across the whole sky. Those are just little markers for keeping the system kind of in check and keeping that area dry and free of natural clouds. Because when you put that nanomaterial, it breaks up the existing moisture. So they don't want any moisture. And just north of that is the picture, what you're seeing underneath. So about 20 miles north of that is that cloud building up. Now that fire plume. So it's a pyrocumulus right there, and it could easily become a pyrocumulonimbus, but they've already got that area covered above it. So this is a quick video. They on that day they had already seen the sky. So I'm kind of showing you the same thing. These are those lower markers. So this is all south of that fire. And whoops, sorry about that. So right here in the background, these are cumulus clouds that through the whole day, they kept spraying over the top so they could keep them flat. So they would keep these from making rain as well. And then this is the next day, they continued spraying. So they're capping that system still. Whoops, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, I had a little thing. So this is the Paradise Fire in California. You can't really see here, but I'll show you a video in a second. But you can see right when these fires start, they start their spraying. Jovi Day Wingington, Dane's wife, got this time lapse. It's one of the best time lapses of engineering over a fire. All of these trails are parallel. Now, a condensation trail should firstly disappear behind a plane. Secondly, if you see a tiny speck in the sky, you know, they're supposed to take place well above 28,000 feet, natural condensation trails. It shouldn't distort sunlight. So what I want you guys to see here is that as the sun passes by these, there's a lot of solar distortion. So that aluminum is causing the sunlight to reflect or dissipate the sunlight. When you have a fire, it's probably not a great idea to fly over the fire or over the smoke. You can reroute around. So the fact that all of these are parallel and they're going over the fire, and we already know that nano aluminum is an accelerant, it's probably not a good idea for these flights to be going on over these wildfires. And this is, again, from Drs. Herndon and Whiteside from our Geoengineering Age, oga.org. Fantastic researchers. But you can see these poor firefighters right here, you know, they're risking their lives, and right above their head, their own government and even CAL FIRE, who knows that these are occurring, are just letting them sit there like fish in a barrel. So this is a pretty informative document. It's fantastic. We're just going to watch 1 single minute of it, talking about how these are intentionally, how these wildfires are intentionally built and manipulated. Verse 13.
Maximum fire intensity is achieved by Incendiary operations must be preceded by at least a week of dry weather, and cloud cover should be 3/8 or less with relative humidity below 50% in the target area.
Okay, relative humidity below 50%. In order for a natural condensation trail to occur, humidity has to be at least 70%.
At the time of ignition. Maximum fire intensity is achieved by spacing ignitions so that adjacent fires begin to interact with each other at the exact time that each fire has reached its maximum normal intensity. Proper use of this area of ignition technique can greatly increase the effectiveness of forest fire as a military weapon.
Okay. So we're going to go to a different screen. We're going to go to NASA Worldview. So keeping these fires going in sequential order or in an area is important in taking down as much forest as possible if you want to open the area up for mining, or taking down as much forest as possible if you want to open the area up so you can have a lot more 5G towers in there for communications or for control of a region, for tracking and tracing, or being part of the Internet of Things, or for smart communities. What they call smart communities, the internment camps. Let's see. So this is Saskatchewan and Manitoba right here, or Saskatoon, excuse me, sorry. I'll pull back. So this is August 1st. This is a very simple map. NASA Worldview does one single image every day. They don't do the same time every day like they used to, because there's so much manipulation going on. This is just one of the maps that you can use. So this is August 2nd, August 3rd, and on the 4th, you can see that they've got these fires really rearing up, and the wind is going over back to the west. And in here, you can see there's a lot more haze. Sorry, I'll pull back a little bit. And all of this cloud around it, none of this is natural here. This is all the new Alto Cirrus here. We did have Alto Cirrus, we just don't, what we see today is the engineered version of it. So there's perpetual clouds over, but there's not moisture. So that's a pretty bad thing. So building up the heat underneath these cloud layers, and then when you zoom in, you can see that they're spraying directly over the fires here too. So you have hundreds of flights going right over the top of this, but when you zoom out, why are they not going in the areas around where there's no fire? And you can see all these other spot fires starting over here too. So now the wind is going kind of south and southeast and north, and then northeast there. So going through this, all you see is the same thing over and over. Contrail to cirrus, or the engineered cloud types. There are no natural clouds. And then you have all these extra new clouds that are developing here. And this is going across and all the way down into the United States by August 19th. And then you have the Alto Cirrus and Scalar here, and they're building this system up. So it's all about keeping the fires going and exacerbating the existing wildfires. So we'll go into all the way into today. So this was September 7th. So they flew clouds to kind of double up on this smoke layer. As you can see, all these old contrail to cirrus or homogenitus, whatever you want to call them, all of this artificial stuff in here over the top. And then here we are today. So we're going to go back to the video for just a second. So the application of frequency to that first hazy cloud layer is what makes kind of this alto cirrus. And it's not a natural cloud. In nature, when a cloud has large enough particulates and you become either a big billowy cumulus cloud, or if you're another natural cloud, it doesn't make the sun a blinding blob. The sky is so hazy now that when you go east or west in the morning or in the evening, sometimes it's several hours where you're blinded by the sun, and oncoming traffic has to have their lights on because you just can't see into the shadows at all. And when you have a cloud pass between you and the sun and it makes the sun brighter, that's because it's got metallic properties inside that cloud as well as chemicals. And with this, you can keep the moisture within an area and you can cut it off pretty much in a straight line. I never saw this as a kid at all. And with these scalar clouds, whoops, I don't think we don't need to show that. Let's go for just a second. Sorry about that. What happened in my video? Can you guys see this? Nope.
No, we cannot see.
Sorry. Having a tough time going back and forth with these screens. Okay, so these scalar looking clouds can go back and forth. This is kind of a hybrid on the right between the alto cirrus and the scalar. But you can have these really broad separated clouds or very tight clouds. And this can happen within just even a section of the sky. But this happens to be all three clouds at once. This lower portion is brand new aerosols that have been laying. Over the Pacific here, you have some where you can still see the ship tracks and the alto cirrus out here. And then this area over Northern California and Oregon, all the way out to Utah, this massive area. That's all kind of a broad scalar. And then in Australia, this is from several years ago, around 2016, someone from Southwest Australia had posted about these odd things that would occur all 3 weeks apart, and they had gotten onto NASA Worldview, and they're the ones that kind of highlighted this in the first place. And I can't remember who it was exactly from back then, and I haven't been allowed on Facebook now for years. But this little square section down here is 200 by 300 miles squared. So this is a combination of the scalar to alto cirrus. This is a massive area where they're controlling moisture and air and wind and things like that. So these are just some examples of the masses of the massive size of these systems if they want to block moisture or block wind or create or exacerbate wind. 2007 was a huge year for wildfires in the US, and this report was one of the first ones that really made me look outside of the continent to see what was happening off the coast during these different wildfires. So this little this is Montana and Idaho. So there was a bunch of wildfires up here. Down in California, there were actually some in Texas and Florida and stuff, as well as some in Kentucky and Missouri. But this was a big area. By nearly September, by August, there were 40 huge wildfires. And as of the fall of this year, this particular year, there were 70,000 wildland fires. So it was a huge, drought was a huge issue back then. And this is August 1st, and over Idaho, you can see that there's fires, and the plume of smoke goes all the way across the US and kind of turns up into Canada. But on the southwest coast of Canada and the northwest coast of the US, you can see a massive straight line of cloud. Now that could never happen in nature. You couldn't have a several thousand long cutoff line in a cloud because that's water in the atmosphere. That would never happen naturally. And of course, you see the footprint of geoengineering. You see those ship tracks up there as well. So that was on the 1st. By the 28th, 4 weeks later, those wildfires are still going, and they're still manipulating the system, not letting any moisture at all come through, and not even a lot of wind. They just want to burn that area out. But what they were still doing every couple days was they were spraying. So if you look across the area between the names of Oregon and Idaho, you can see several thousand long miles of these aerosols that are sprayed directly over that wildfire. So we're going to kind of quickly go through these other cloud types for those of you who haven't seen them just yet. When they listed these new cloud types, there were subtypes. So the Arcus family of cloud included these two cloud types. So on the top, those are called shelf clouds. So we rarely have storm fronts anymore, which is why when you hear the news on television, they don't talk about wind and temperature and barometric pressure and humidity. All they do is they show you a map with, like, dark green is going to be heavy rain and light green is going to be light rain or whatever. So they're not really telling you about the systems because these systems are built up. So you have shelf clouds on the top and the bottom. These are called roll clouds. And these roll clouds can be several miles long, or they can be pretty short. And they can be parallel or perpendicular to the systems. They can also be by themselves with no cloud cover over the top of them, or like you see here where there's a cloud layer over the top of them. On the top here, these are Kevin Hemmel's clouds. They're also called wave clouds. And on the bottom, these are undulatus asperatus. And Jim does a great show on explaining how these work. I think HARP is involved in the undulatus cloud. When I was around 40, my late 40s, 47, 48, was the first time I saw these clouds. These are called mammatus clouds. And these can go across the whole entire sky as far as you can see end to end, or they can be just one little section of the sky. And these don't always occur at the same time and with the same types of weather. They have been known to occur in Texas after massive rain dumps. But I've seen them just come out of clouds when we've had different types of engineered thunderstorm events. So we rarely ever see the long, low rainbows, the single rainbows, the full spectrum, beautiful, low arcing rainbows. Today, what we mostly see are these double arced chemical rainbows, chembos, and they're at a very full 90-degree angle. In this lower right-hand corner, this image was taken, I think, in Oregon. I've still not been able to find the origin or the photographer, but it's a great image and just shows how screwed up nature is. And people think that these are wonderful. You know, they say, look at God's coming out of the ground. And it's like, no, that's not God. So anyway, with all of the material in the air, the nanomaterial and the nanometals, the atmosphere gets highly charged. It's highly electrostatic, so it needs to be discharged. So sometimes it's intentionally discharged and sometimes it's accidentally discharged, but it's always a dangerous thing, and especially today, because an abundance of aerosol particulates in the atmosphere increases the lifespans of large storms, and it makes these clouds grow bigger, they live longer, and they produce more extreme storms. By 2022, this anomaly had occurred. The largest mega flash, I think it's the largest one ever recorded in the US, but there was one in South America. So it's almost 500 miles long. And there's record lightning now in the Arctic. By 2021, we had nearly double the amount of strikes than the previous 9 years combined. And we're doing heavy engineering over the Arctic because we need to get rid of those nasty little contiguous glaciers so we can get to the minerals. So, yeah, I'm being sarcastic. With mega strikes like this one, 500 sheep were killed with a single lightning strike, and the shepherd himself was knocked out. And this was a single strike that took place a couple of years ago. And then we're seeing this a lot more often, where we're seeing thousands of strikes in a single area. Now, with these anomalous strikes, right here in this particular news thing, they showed a lot of cloud to ground, but we're also having much, much more cloud to cloud strikes. And that's just that full discharge where all of that material is in the upper atmosphere. So if you're older, you probably remember when a storm came in and the two systems, a super heated system met a cool system, and you'd have a thunder shower or a thunderstorm. You'd have a handful of strikes, and they would be really loud, and you'd count to find out how many miles there are. You'd see the lightning strike or the lightning flash, and you'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you hear this boom, the thunder. Well, today we have storms that are emitting thousands of strikes, and you might hear the first handful of strikes, but then you don't hear anything after that. Or you'll have a strike, and the roll of thunder will last 5 or 10 minutes. When I was in Colorado, during one fully engineered system, we had a thunder roll that lasted 45 minutes, followed by another one that was around 40 minutes. And nobody talked about it. It didn't even make the news. The material in the atmosphere, all the nanomaterials, those are coming down our roads, and we see them on our cars. We never see completely clean cars after any of these rainstorms or even snowstorms, for that matter. We always have these. Sorry, I'm in an area by the casinos here. I apologize if you heard the yelling outside. So the hail is another problem. It damages property, of course, but it kills a lot of wildlife. It kills livestock, and it ruins crops. So with weather warfare, even in your own country, you can wipe out crops in an area in just a matter of minutes. This particular hemp farm lost 30 acres in a quarter of an hour, several $1 million in revenue. The last thing we're going to talk about here is the IoT, the Internet of Things, and 5G or telecommunications, and geoengineering. So with telecommunications, we have ground-based communications structures and antennas, and then we have space satellites, and we also have regular satellites, and then we have low Earth orbiting or LEO satellites, and we've added several million, or have several million pending and proposed and current satellites in space right now. And with clouds, cloud droplets can be bigger than a millimeter. So with millimeter waves, they don't pass through clouds very well. So you have to keep those clouds broken up so that you can have constant surveillance and communications from space to ground systems. So one of the reasons that they're getting rid of natural weather is to help with the space fence and space force technologies, and also the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bio Things, the Internet of Nano Things. All of these things depend on controlling the atmosphere. So geoengineering is the foundation of all of the Great Reset. So this is a company called Leo Labs, which is contracted with the U.S. Department of Commerce to help support space traffic. So they have thousands of satellites themselves, and they help track all of all of the satellites. And then they also track all of the space junk. So that is only a part of the issue with geoengineering. So millimeter waves don't travel very far. They only travel a few hundred meters, sometimes up to a mile or 1 to 5 miles, but that's less common. So millions of new towers have been added. And I'm not sure about Canada, but in the US, we've also added 350 million new 5G LED street lamps. And I'm sure you guys have as well. So they put these towers everywhere, and these millimeter waves, they can't be interrupted, because when you have driverless vehicles and driverless delivery vehicles, and you have UAVs or unmanned air vehicles, and you have all sorts of new robotic humans and robotic soldiers coming down the rails right now, you want to be able to control them so that they can control the humans in the very near future by 2030. With space, all of the junk that's in space, including satellites, we're launching thousands of satellites up into space, these low Earth orbiting satellites, every day all over the world into space. And every time we do, the barium fuels are destroying the ozone, and it's causing huge issues to our already perilously thin ozone. But they only stay out there for a couple years, and then they come back through the atmosphere a second time. And so what they stated in this space.com article is that researchers caution the poorly understood atmospheric processes triggered by the chemicals, and that they could lead to an uncontrolled geoengineering experiment, the consequences of which are unknown. Well, we know what the consequences are. No ozone means no life on Earth. Now, from the ground up, 5G causes huge microbial changes. And so we have microbes everywhere, every leaf of every tree. All of our soils have microbes in them. Our bodies, on the top of our bodies and inside our bodies, are microbes, and all of these things are being affected by millimeter waves. Now, RFR, non-ionizing radiation, causes all sorts of things in soil bacteria, from deformation to toxic production. It causes mold proliferation, and it causes even mycotoxins to become more toxic than they are even initially. It also causes failure of reproduction in a lot of the microbes in soils. So because these millimeter waves are absorbed by plants, all of the plant parts become toxic. So if you have a 5G tower or a 5G LED street lamp near your garden or near your farm, it's like nuclear radiation. It doesn't change the color or the flavor of the food, but the food itself becomes toxic. So everything from the pollinators to us, to wildlife and other animals that eat the food from the ground and trees, we are all getting poisoned, not just from the radiation itself, but from what we're eating. And as with humans, in plants, the electromagnetic radiation causes intracellular, interrupts voltage-gated calcium channels. And it also makes plants more flammable because they are expressing more terpenes. This is just outside of where I live in Lake Tahoe. This is one of the big casinos. On this side of the building, there's around 30 4G LTE and 5G towers. So this is it up on the right-hand corner. And all of the plants in the area, you can see not a single one of the plants has a healthy crown. Now, part of that is because of geoengineering, but a lot of that is from the 5G radiation, because the plants are absorbing the radiation. So these are aspens, and then there's also maples on this area. There's maples and oaks and everything. And I don't know if you can see, but aspens have sort of a matte finish. They're kind of like the maple leaf. It's a nice, smooth, matte finish, but these are becoming extremely sticky and pitchy. The pitch or the sap is coming out. And so this is a 5G LED street lamp, and then above this on the left-hand side is a 5G tower as well. So I'm going to kind of show you all of these trees are completely destroyed. The crowns, you can see they're not healthy. And then with the pine trees, even the pine trees are completely distressed. These are all dead branches from these street lamps on these on all of the conifers here. And then you can't really tell those are too far away. But what I'm going to show you here in this video is an aspen. I'm going to go up against an aspen and show you how sticky, how much pitch is coming out of not the bark of the plant, but the leaf. So you see the deformation in the leaf. So this is an aspen tree. It should be a beautiful kind of a pale green. All the leaves should be uniform instead of big ones and little ones, and all these odd branches reaching for the sky while half of it's dead. So all of this is really pitchy. You can see that there's leaf deformation. There's a lot of mold. 5G causes mold proliferation, as I stated before. These plants certainly shouldn't be moldy, and all of these other plants that are on the ground, the shrubs and the flowers, have this very same thing. And I have spoken with the city council about this. I've spoken with the firefighters about this. And I don't know what is going on, but people are completely brain dead. They just simply do not want to know about this. This is in the same neighborhood. All of these pine trees, conifers, cone-bearing trees, they're all completely affected. There's dead and dying branches. They're still producing cones. This is a new cone, and these young cones, before they fall, they generally have a little bit of pitch on it. But this thing is completely covered. It's dripping sap. And these needles, instead of being very smooth, when you draw your hand down this type of needle, it's about a 4 to 6 inch needle. When you draw your hand, it's really smooth. These needles were actually sticking together. There was so much pitch in there. Now, in 2016, I was working with one of the attorneys in the Lake Tahoe Basin. This is Lake Tahoe on the right-hand side. It's a lake that's 22 miles long and 12 miles wide. It's got about a dozen cities. It sits in several counties and in 2 states, California and Nevada. So there's an oversight committee called the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. And this group filed a 5G lawsuit against TRPA for allowing 5G in the basin and become that prolific. But at the same time, there's a highway that leads away from the lake, and this highway goes to a major city. And back in 2016, I was telling my friend, I said, they have all of these 5G towers in this area, and they can't communicate because they're in the middle of the forest, and there's hundreds, if not thousands of trees in some cases in between each of these towers. I said, the only way that these towers could ever communicate is if a fire came through and wiped out this area. And a couple of years later, a fire went through, that they remounted the exact same spots where they had the original towers, and they are all directly in line with each other. So whether that's a coincidence or conspiracy is up to you. But I think anyone who is informed in any capacity understands what we're up against right now. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the talk. Thanks.
Wow, Nikki. Amazing. Well, we are getting to 7:45 our time. Yeah, it was wonderful. And I would like to open up the floor for everybody or anybody who has any question. So please come on up and ask Nikki what you want to know. Is there anything? Go ahead. I'm sure Troy's got a question. I'm very sure he does. Come on, Troy. Come on up.
That was very, very informative. I took lots of pictures, and it explains a lot. I knew that that the geoengineering was increasing the flammability of the forest, but I didn't know how to put it all together. So I appreciate you putting it all together with all your hard work. Um, so what do you suggest? What do you suggest that we do? I've contacted Environment Canada, or they're now called Environment and Climate Change Canada, and I've asked them, because we have a Weather Modification Act and a weather modification regulations here in Canada, and I've point blank asked them, are you modifying the weather? Is somebody modifying the weather? And all that they've admitted is, yes, they modify the weather in Alberta to prevent hailstorms. And so that's all that they're admitting to. And so I'm wondering, aside from me cutting down 5G towers, or I don't know what else to do. Do you have any suggestions? Like, what are you doing in your area?
Well, right now I'm getting ready to work with a group on a project, and we can't really talk about it publicly just yet. So we're at the end stages where the funding is supposed to come in. And the group that I'm going to be working with, they've been working on this for 10 months. And so we're kind of down to the wire with the funding. This was the projected time for the funding. So when we do that, we'll be able to talk more about that. But I'm not a proponent of geoengineering, but I do think that people should be fighting fire with fire if you can. And it's never a good idea to mess with the environment. But if you have a severe drought and wildfires, if you can produce rain to put the wildfires out, just to give yourself a little more time, that might be something to do. And as far as the 5G, getting protection for yourself before, if you can't take action quick enough. This is one of the companies we work with is called Spiro. And we have this on our 5G and the B webpage. And I don't know, you probably can't see through this on radio, but there's all these little discs within this, and these break up the millimeter wave frequency, but they still let the hertz range, they still let the earth frequency come through, so you can still ground on your property. You can still have the natural resonance coming through. And this is one of probably 5 or 6 technologies for protecting yourself while you're working to stop 5G and taking down towers. You know, when people during the pandemic, they were setting towers on fire and things like that. If someone is raping you, even if you don't know you're being raped, you're still being raped. It's a penetration of our bodies with not another person, but with a technology. I don't consent to it. I think that we should have the right to take down these towers if we do not want them. And doing it legally is a tough thing. But there's also the notices of liability holding individuals accountable. And those are things that you can do with Cal Washington. And in the United States, another thing that's possible is in the US here, we can use our sheriffs, because the sheriffs override, county sheriff overrides the federal powers in a county. So I don't know enough about the law in the laws in Canada as far as that goes. But I don't know if you know Cal Washington. He does those notices of liability. So on our 5G and the B page, we have information on that. But there are things that we are going to be working on doing. I can do another talk for Geoengineering for Canada when we get the okay from the group. I just can't talk about the stuff that we're doing right now. And we're not the only ones that are looking at these particular solutions. It's just that nobody wants to ruin it for anyone else that's working on it. And because there's so much targeting going on, it's a tough thing to do.
No, I appreciate that. I understand that. I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing and that you have done. And I've got more ammo in my toolbox now, thanks to your presentation tonight.
Good, thanks.
Gary, you've got, yeah, there is a hand up. Gary, come on. Go right ahead. We can't hear you. Okay, hand is down. Okay. Well, but I would like to take the opportunity to welcome a really, really wonderful woman here on that call. I'm so thrilled that she's on. She's her name is Nadia. And Nadia actually is the co-founder of Geoengineering Free Canada. She and myself, we started this group. Nadia, welcome to the show. Hey, how are you doing?
Oh. Well, my hair's a mess. Which is kind of like showing my face. Oh, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for doing this. Yeah, thank you for doing this. The presentation was excellent, and Bettina, you are a diehard. Yeah, I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nadia. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you're here. I mean, I'm thrilled. When I saw your name pop up, then I was like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So now the hand is up again. Gary, go right ahead.
Hey, I got it working this time. Nikki, it's a very good presentation. I really enjoyed it, and it answers a lot of questions. Because we've been a lot of things you're saying about the trees, the sap, the fires, everything. We're seeing that in Alberta. We had a bad fire season, and this year, and the one in Jasper in particular. I was just wondering, Troy, are you from Alberta?
No, I'm from Nova Scotia, but I did live in Banff for 4.5 years, so I'm familiar with Jasper.
Yeah. Okay, so they're our premier there, Danielle Smith. She's been doing a lot of town hall meetings, and there's the question about geoengineering is being raised quite a bit, and especially the Jasper fire. And like they said, they were, because Jasper's in federal territory, they were waiting. Provincial had everything ready to go, the firefighters, the equipment, everything ready to go, but they had to wait for the federal government to give the word. And by the time they give the word, I mean, the fire was so hot and intensive that they couldn't do anything about it. They had to let it burn. And there's a lot of questions about that fire because the council had meeting with Trudeau, in April earlier, and rezoning and everything coming up. So it's questionable, very questionable. But the interesting thing of it is this so I approached that after a town hall meeting. I approached an MP there, and I said, if I get information on geoengineering for you, I said, can you get it to the premier? And he said, yes. He said, well, set up a meeting in my office. We'll go ahead and then we'll take everything to her. So that's one of the reasons I come on like here tonight is to see what this information is and what I can use and who I can draw on to pull this information together so we can present it to her either in a Zoom format or get people so she's got the facts, because she's done the same thing as what you're saying, Troy. She's phoned the airports, different people in charge of the airports, the Canadian air transportation, and basically, oh yeah, we're just doing a little bit of seeding here and there, trying to stop the hail and whatnot. So nothing really, they're just giving her the runaround. So So that's why I've decided to go ahead and bring this information to her now that we've got this opportunity. And she's coming to the people looking for information. So that's why she's holding these town halls. So it's a perfect opportunity to get, and I only live 15 minutes from the Minister of Transport. So if I can pull all this together and get this information to her, then it would be great. So to start, Dave.
Wonderful. That's great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, so in my experience, like I gave a presentation to Sean Fraser, who's the housing minister for the federal government now, and I spoke with our premier, and he, in front of the public at the event that I was at, he said that he would have a meeting with me, but then afterwards he reneged on that and wouldn't have a meeting with me. But I did approach him when Nova Scotia was burning last year about why I said, why does the Alberta government cares more about their people than you do? Because they're willing to cloud seed to get rid of hail, but you're not willing to cloud seed to get rid of these fires. And he just ignored me. But I think it's obviously something bigger than our government that's doing this, because it's worldwide. It's coming from airplanes. It's the whole jet fuel and the aerosols that are being sprayed and all that. So it's something bigger. And so I think that we really have to nail this down and figure out who exactly is doing this, because the only evidence that I have about Alberta is that they cloud seed for hailstorms. They've admitted that. I have all the documents. You can contact Diane Campbell, who is the administrator for the weather modification regulation, and she's with Environment Canada, and she'll send you the information. Tell her that you want the information about cloud seeding in Alberta, and she'll send you the list. According to their regulations, they are supposed to submit what they're going to do prior to cloud seeding, but because Alberta does it on an ongoing basis, they get an exemption, and they just have to submit at the end of the year. This is what we did last year. So if you contact her, she will give you the information about what they did last year, and that'll be something that you can bring to Danielle Smith and say, listen, these are the companies that are doing it. The big one in Alberta is called Weather Modification Inc., and I want to say it's out of I can't even think of the name where it's out of. It's closer to Saskatchewan, where one of their offices are. I can't remember the name right now, but that's the company that's doing it out there.
And is it Jerry or Gary? Sorry.
Jerry.
Jerry. So we also had put together a workshop, an attorney's workshop, that showed the commercial and the military and the science foundations, and then also how the rest of the billionaires and the investors in the Great Reset are part of these projects, how they all connect in different ways. So finding these little groups, even a little weather modification group, sometimes they just have no idea. They have no idea that these things exist at all. When I went to the AMS, the American Meteorological Society's conference on planned and inadvertent weather modification. It's a conference they hold every 2 years. And in 2018, I was there with Jim Lee, and he was doing a video report, and I was doing just a handwritten report. We both went there with a press pass, and I spoke with seasoned meteorologists from NBC. I don't know if you've heard of these corporations, NBC and CBS News corporations out of the US, from Florida, from Chicago, and one in Kentucky and a couple other places. And these meteorologists, and this is in 2018, they didn't even know that there were new cloud types that were listed in 2017. So these people are, the people that are disseminating the news to us, and they don't know what's going on. So it's a tough thing to breach in a lot of cases.
Well, like here, we don't pay attention much to our mainstream media because they're being paid off by the government, so they don't really tell the truth anymore.
Yeah.
But no, and like over Alberta, especially, like we said, a bunch of us were talking. We said this summer, this year, we're going to get hit hard, especially by the spraying, and they've been doing it. You can see them spraying H patterns above the clouds. It's all over. You know, you get jets coming from like WestJet. You don't see a lot, and they're just might maybe leave a little contrail. But a lot of international flights, they're coming over, and they're wide trails, and they widen, and you know the morning will start out blue, and by 2 o'clock it's white. You can't see anything. And so
yeah, and the U.S. military is a huge part of that as well, because they own a lot of commercial jets. I mean, they're retrofitted, but they own them, and we're kind of bullying the whole world. And aerosol technologies are just one of the technologies. You know, they're using all of these other ones as well. But anyway.
Yeah, another thing I was going to say with the 5G, like I checked the levels coming, because we got a 5G tower just south of us, about 4 or 5 kilometers. But what I did is we tried it out, and it seems to be working. We've got a 528 frequency over our acreage, which we get from Focus Life Force Energy, and that 528 frequency seems to break down that anything from the 5G tower that might happen. And then also we got shungite. Like I wear shungite, you know, a little piece of shungite on me all the time. We got it on the computers, and if you can, with using the meter, if you've got the shungite around, it'll go to 0, and as soon as you take the shungite off, it'll go up. So just little tricks like that. But the 528 frequency seems to be doing a lot, and our plants around our acreage just grow like crazy. Like it's the trees, everything are very healthy. So I'm thinking that might be doing it. I'm not sure, because a lot of trees are dying in the area, so tops are dying.
Yeah, it's another nail in the coffin for a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, if there is nothing else, and I hear that Nikki has to go, so I would like to again thank you so much, Nikki. I love your presentations. We've been in touch quite frequently, and so I really appreciate all what you're doing for us, with us, and help to get the word out, so that we hopefully can, you know, battle them and just get rid of of that geoengineering and the pollution and all this, what's affecting us and our food and everything and everybody.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for having me.
Well, thank you as well. So then this is it for tonight. And thanks again to everybody else that showed up tonight. And this video will be uploaded on YouTube and on Rumble as well, then in a short period of time. Thanks again. And I would like to end this call then as well. Thanks, Nikki.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.